Greetings, and welcome to Michelle Speaks. If you hide it, you can't feel it. I am Michelle Portier, the host of the hour. I am a life recovery coach, author, serial entrepreneur, inspirational speaker, voice talent, but most importantly, I'm an advocate, and I advocate for the following causes: domestic and sexual assault, as well as military sexual trauma and mental health. Secondary to those that have encountered military sexual trauma. And today we are highlighting military sexual trauma survivor Lynn Gieser, an Army veteran who has turned her tragedy into a triumph. And so before we get into it, I want to give you some stats on military sexual trauma. So as of 2018, 20,500 service members were the victims of military sexual trauma. 13,000 of those were women, 7,500 were men, and a large number of cases go unreported for the following reasons. 64% of women report that if they report, they face retaliation, and 66% of those that report retaliation comes from within their command. And so a third of those that are discharged are often discharged for other than honorable um, services, other than honorable discharges. 24% of those discharges are other than honorable, and they are discharged within 7 months of reporting. So that is a great deterrent for those that want to um, seek restitution or resolution because they've been assaulted. But the deterrent is that they face retaliation, so they often don't go. It goes unreported, but yet those that have endured it suffer the consequences and the repercussions of what they've experienced for years to come. So, without further ado, we're going to dive right into it today. I am so thankful and grateful for Army veteran Lynn Geiser for allowing me to journey along with her as she shares her journey of her experience and how she turned that tragedy into triumph. I had the opportunity to meet Lynn about 4 years ago through another
Mhm.
veteran related organization. So thank you so much, Lynn, for agreeing to come on and just share your journey and inspire hope and help for others that have walked this journey. Um, I'm inspired to do this because of my own journey. So thank you again. And so without further ado, I introduce you all to Army veteran Lynn Geiser. And so for my listening audience, Miss Lynn, can you tell us who is Lynn Geiser personally, professionally, and spiritually?
Well, that at first that was the hardest thing because usually talking about yourself is really difficult. But I would starting with growing up. As a growing up, I was in a dysfunctional family, and that's where my military career started, and finding purpose in my life.
Hmm.
I am today. I served 10 years in the military from National Guard to active duty. And I do have, I'm a family of five, where I have a 23-year-old who served with me during that time frame. So he deals with a lot of secondary MST, PTSD issues. But we do have in the household right now, we have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old who is sensory autism, and my husband who has gone through the journey and the triumph, and the struggles with me. And and this month is 11 years being together.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
As thank you. As a professional, I wore many hats throughout the time. When I served 10 years in the military in general, and I got out in 2004. I got out homeless. I got out as a dishonorable discharge. And I upgraded it because it was considered a personality or adjustment disorder, which Michelle described earlier. A lot of women veterans or male veterans, either
Hmm.
sexually assaulted or adjustment, deal with that piece of it. But through the years, 10, 15 years, I'm still in that recovery process where it's taking me that long to tell the story.
Right.
Um, But during that journey, after getting out, I still pursued a master's degree. In 2008, I became a counselor for about 4 years. And then at that moment, that's when my re-triggers and traumas started re-triggering, because I started a claim process, and I also started working in an environment where I did not realize at the time that it put me in a crisis mode for 2 years.
Right.
So in that process, I served about 3 years as an employment specialist, as a counselor, as a mediator, as an advocate, working with males and female veterans, and I loved working and passionately, sitting one-on-one with these individuals and hearing their stories, because it's so unique. Everybody has a story to tell. But
Right.
in my journey, in 2018, um, my employment opportunities, I just couldn't do it anymore. And this is where I moved to Florida. I said
Right.
enough's enough, and I moved to Florida, and I took 1 year off for myself. And
Mhm.
but during that time frame, professionally and spiritually, during that time frame, I took a dive. I took a dive. I went from um, a Wisconsin VA to the Florida VA, and they stopped all my medications and stopped everything, and I had to start over. So my physical and my mental pain started all back over.
Right.
Couldn't get out of bed, and there's just so many different obstacles that. Then finally, a few of our support systems in the VA and a few of the women veterans reached out and said, "No, you got to fight."
Mhm.
And they helped fight, support me, and we fought for my claims for 4 years and
Right.
fought for many, many different obstacles. And to that point, as of March of this year, I won two out of three of the process. And this is where I started also 2 years ago. That's where I started the nonprofit.
That's awesome. And so I wanted to, I know you mentioned you ended up homeless. 40% of homeless female vets have experienced or have faced military sexual trauma, and they're 2 times as likely to experience homelessness, with 9 out of 10 of the victims of military sexual assault being female. With that being said, I want you to touch on how you've been impacted by the assault. You said you ended up homeless. How did you end up there?
Well, when I was in the active duty, I served 3 years honorably. In the first 3 years, I served about 2.5 years straight in the field with the Ranger Battalion, and a lot of great soldiers and officers in the field. When I finally come out of the field after 3 years, I re-enlisted in the same unit. We had new unit commanders, new unit. I also, my medical really deteriorated from there. Finding out 10 years later that I react to MSG, which is in many, many military food. And I served 3 years in the field eating MREs and barely eating a lot of different kinds of foods. So I got sick. I got sick really bad. And that year took a really big toll. While I was on the medical board, and during that process of actually I got custody of my child at that time also. I was also sexually assaulted in that time frame. I thought through my process, my platoon sergeant knew what I was, where I was, how I was doing. He had my back. I thought
Right,
he had my back.
right.
And one day, and we were friends. I trusted him. And
Mhm.
one day, I was doing an appointment, and he came to the house, and he was a Jekyll and Hyde moment. It was what are you doing? He would come up to me, he'd push me down and push me down on the couch and try to rape me. Um, he
I'm sorry
sexually
to experience that. Yeah.
Yeah, and sexually assaulted me in many different ways. I'm not comfortable quite yet. I'm going into the full detail. But the ending result was 8 months out of the process. I had 8 months left and while I was going through the medical board, my behaviors changed. My
Mhm.
behaviors, I didn't feel, I didn't feel I could trust anyone.
Mhm.
I was, oh, you want to say I was disobedient for officials, higher officials, even though it wasn't easy, being out of the field and in the officers and the higher up didn't know anything about me. After the medical board was in the process, the only way to stop the medical board was to give a soldier 3 Article 15s. And I was
Mhm.
also put on orders to Germany. During that process, the unit did not, there was a lot of other issues going on, but through that process, that's what the commander did give me. It was 3 Article 15s, disobeyed an officer, failure to pay debit, which they held my BAH for 5 months. And there was just so much other little things that
So,
it was
so
torture.
for somebody that is not familiar with military terminology, what is your BAH?
BAH actually is when you're active duty, they pay for your housing,
Mhm.
which is great because when you get out of the military, you're on your own, is paid
Right.
$1,500 a month. But yeah,
Yeah.
and they I was allowed to move off post because I got custody of my son, and
Mhm.
that was the time that was I was sexually assaulted just before I left post. But I think in the same time frame, I think it actually had to do with the sexual assault. But I didn't put two and two together. I was
Right.
very uncomfortable around my platoon sergeant. I was
Right.
I always had another soldier near me at all times. I wouldn't go in the same room as him. I was very uncomfortable. I made excuses, but at the same time, because of the 3 Article 15s that I was given, I was also put on extra duty every moment they could get me. And eventually I was on a profile that they did not
So
like.
basically, you were in survivor mode because you still had to work in the same command or platoon as your attacker.
Yes, yes. And I was asked, I was even in the writing, an administrative board was taken over at the end. Even with the administrative board process, it shows that I asked to be taken out of that unit 3 different times, and that's why I put myself on Germany. Even though I was going through a medical board, I needed to get out.
Right.
It was killing me. It was killing me, and I mean, literally, my phone was taken away during hours, and I was given a after I reported the incident because I was already on administrative board for the 3 Article 15s.
Right.
After I reported it, they gave me a female to walk around with,
Hmm.
and I felt like a puppy dog.
Right.
And it was I felt I was the prisoner, not the individual.
So
And
was it
so
more for protection or more for them to keep an eye on you?
keep an eye on me. It was where does she go? Where is she going? She's always to the appointment. She's never reporting. She's not. And it was the thing of it is I was always reporting to my sergeant. Unfortunately, at the end when it happened, I was reporting to the platoon sergeant, which was the one that was sexually assaulting me. And then they decided because I was in such a crisis, they required me to go to counseling. And
Hmm.
during that process of active duty, the counselor was best friends with the platoon sergeant. And it was
So
used
that was just a horrible
against
environment
anything
to
I
be in
said, which
also.
I did say at the time.
Wow.
Yes, yes. It was very, very suicidal. And it because I had my son, and I was off post, they threatened me that I would have been in jail if, or one on one, that they took my shoelaces away even though they weren't watching me. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't. It was just on paper.
Hmm. So how did that affect how you showed up as a mother? And obviously there were some challenges there with you even attempting to mother your child. But how you showed up as a mother and as a friend and in your other relationships during that time, and then even years later now, how has that impacted you, affected you?
Relationships are very difficult, very difficult. Even the relationship of my husband, through years and years of triumph, I went through, even with the headaches. When I got out, I didn't want anything to do with the military. I was, like I said, I was homeless. I was in survivor mode for almost 10 years.
Mhm.
Even though I processed the claim process in 2016, I won my case, and got out of financial hardship. I was still in survivor mode. I didn't want to talk about what happened. I didn't want, because I was ashamed. I was
Yeah.
ashamed of what happened. I was ashamed that every time I said something was, well, good for you, or you deserve it, or this didn't really happen, or whatever the case may be. It was just like, why am I telling anybody anything?
Right.
Well, relationships in general, I didn't have a best friend or anybody to come to, or even especially when I was homeless. I went from Columbus, Georgia, Fort Benning, back home to Wisconsin, just because I was homeless.
Right.
Um, and with relationships, it took about 2 years. Um, in 2007 is when I met my husband. But in my relationships, while I was active duty and out, it was, I would say, it was permissive. The word, if I'm saying it correctly, it was, relationships were not correct. There were domestic violence issues. Just the relationships were terrible.
Right.
Um, to this day, now I see it, but back then it was always trying to please the other person and not myself, because I didn't feel like I deserved it. I
Yeah.
was a bad soldier, and
Mhm.
when I went through this administrative board, it was 25 pages of going through five, my unit commander, my battalion commander, head commander, of the whole post was even involved in the circumstances, of just getting, chaptering me out. And they didn't care if I was sexually assaulted. They didn't care. They ripped the documentation and called me a liar at the time in the process. And that person, was in the process of the administrative board. He was talking, um, using things against me at the time of the process, and he shouldn't have been, in my opinion, he shouldn't have been there, um, being one of the or not the perpetrator, but one of the individuals that used the evidence against me because
Right.
of what he had done.
So you weren't supportive of him that met the administrative board process. And this is a common thing that I'm hearing um, for survivors, that one, they end up homeless, as I experienced, and all of the other survivors that I've highlighted have experienced either the guilt, the shame, the fear of reprisal, the lack of support. It just seems to be a common theme that's resonating through all of the survivors that I've highlighted or that I've spoken to. I know that I experienced. And so, what are some of the obstacles that you've encountered in seeking help, to kind of minimize the effects because of the not just the effects of the trauma, the assault that you encountered, but the effects of trying to get um, resolution to that, and then in encountering those obstacles from the very institution that you were serving?
Many obstacles. But this is why I'm where I'm at today. And I
Mhm.
think many women, and males can actually kind of counter on what some of the things that I have encountered also. When I got out, of course, like I mentioned, I was homeless. Resources available, reach out to the, other organization, veteran organization, nonprofit veteran organization, was really tough. Um,
Mhm.
and it was a male at that time, and I got out in 2004. It was still a big male masculine veteran organization. They're starting a little bit now as far as women in the veteran organizations, but there's still a lot of struggle in those veteran organizations to this day.
Mhm.
Um, but in many different avenues, it's not just that; it's the resources available. The big thing for me, even though I became a counselor for 4 years and in the field and helping other veterans and families, I struggled,
Mhm.
being connected with a counselor because of the circumstances in active duty. The circumstances where I encountered the perpetrator's best friend, and he came across as, hey, I'm his, I work, I played with him as baseball, and oh, you were in that unit. Oh, I'm friends with him. And, I didn't say much about that part that he sexually assaulted me. But it was this thing, it was just devastating because me going into seeing another counselor, it took forever. It took forever when I got out. It took almost 9 to 10 years to seek something because I was in such a crisis mode at the time. But when I did seek counseling, I couldn't go to my local area because I was an advocate, a woman advocate in the local area, so everybody knew me in
Right.
Wisconsin. But then when I went into, I traveled 30 minutes to go see a counselor, and the first one is I can see you 2 times. It was a social worker. Then it got transferred again, and that person, that counselor never stayed. She quit. Then the next one is, hey, I can send you out and you can do EMDR, which never happened. I got sent out to work on biofeedback. It was a very entertaining, an interesting concept of biofeedback and EMDR. It helped a little bit in the perspective, but that's not what saved me.
Right.
I guess what saved me was in 2018. It's kind of where I met you, or 2015 actually, where I
Right.
met you. And I didn't reach out to anything. I didn't reach out to organizations at that time. And I had to fight. I had to fight to get in to be accepted as a fellowship as the mission continues.
Right.
Um, I had a general under honorable condition, and they asked me why. And at
Mhm.
that time, being ashamed and still being ashamed of having to write my statement out was tough. And so somebody called me and said, hey, I understand, and fought for me to get into the program. And I got in, and as a fellowship for 6 months, I did the um, volunteer site over in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I stayed with them for over a year and developed this program where social connections with women, reach out about trauma. And it was just amazing. But I wanted to do this individual, a mentor, I guess. Jim Rady was a great mentor, and he would not let me down. He kept saying, "No, you can do this. You can do this."
Right. Right. I remember Jim Robbins. He was my associate, and we stay connected to this day. So they had some awesome mentors. I just wanted to share with you, Lynn, that you have numerous supporters here just saying that they're honored that you were able to share your story, and thank you for sharing and fighting and for being an advocate. And I just want you to know that you've got loads of support here today as you are so brave and courageous to kind of share your journey to help others that may be on the fence about whether or not they want to disclose or they want to reach out and get the help. So I just wanted to share that with you, that you've got nothing but support here today as you share your journey. So thank you again for entrusting me with to help you to journey along that path with you today. And so, there's so much that you're sharing, and it's so rich because it's something that um, anybody that's encountered that we struggle with, even years later. And so, on that note, I just wanted to ask, what are some of the challenges that you face even today, daily, as a result of everything that you experienced during that process?
Well, a lot of the issues that I face deal with when I moved. I will start, I guess, because I will start when I got out of the military. I had a lot of when I got out, I wouldn't say diagnosed with just fibromyalgia and adjustment disorder. That was what even though I had adjustment disorder is pretty much a personality disorder. They can't figure out what's really going on. So they kind of, at many years, for 10, 15 years, that's the main diagnosis that we see a lot of before PTSD came out, adjustment disorder, saying that there's something wrong mentally, but we don't know what it is. And then the fibromyalgia is just pain throughout the body where, again, I had the shoulder and neck pain, get migraines on a daily basis. And, when I got out, that's what it was all diagnosed as, fibromyalgia. We are still fighting to this day to separate those pieces, but it was continuously decreased in my in my physical and my mental. Physically, even when I moved to Florida, because of a lack of stuff I've gotten back, I had to restart over from the VA system. I literally could not get out of bed for days and sometimes weeks. People,
Mhm.
when I first moved here in 2018, I I would classify, a lot of the doctors classified me as agoraphobia. I was fear of the community, fear of going outside my home. Even though with a service dog, it was more anxiety just to go out. I mean, I would be sweating by time even just going out in the community and walking.
Mhm.
But it also was to the point physically that I got to the point my ankles would give out, my feet. I ended up getting plantar, if I said that correct, plantar issues. Now I get new shoes and got mobility things to for walking. It's like having MS, like one day your body will be fine, the next day I can barely walk.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a lot of physical, mental, but it wasn't just that. It was being able to be, what's the word? I couldn't live like that anymore. I could not
Right.
live like that. I lived day in and day out, even with migraines, going into the ER and they couldn't figure out what was going on, and finding out months later that I was anemia and I have hyperthyroidism and got so much other little things happening, which misdiagnosis or diagnosed 10 years later, even though it was there. So there was a lot of different complications. And I'm finally starting to get a lot of help with the mental and the physical. I do have a mental health that I do see online.
Right.
Um, I still have issues going into the VA system and seeing a counselor online, but I have been seeing this one for about a year. I had to fire my first one here.
Right.
But other than that, it was because there was more harm than, and it's okay to fire your counselor if you don't
Right.
fit
Well,
in.
it's important to advocate for yourself. So I know you mentioned earlier when we were talking prior to coming on, you mentioned how it had impacted your children and how they relate to you, as far as trusting and not being affectionate. And is that something that's changing now, or is it getting better, or do you still feel that disconnect? Um,
It was it's slowly when I first got out of the military, even be a single mom, because I was a single mom for many years. Even be a single mom, I was very distant. And I could sit on a computer and not realize where time was. I could, and was it screaming, anytime of screaming, anytime of loud noises would irritate me really, really harsh. And then I would start screaming myself. I would yell. And it wouldn't put a very family-oriented, positive environment in. I've learned over time by watching my husband be a father figure, emotional father figure,
mhm.
um, and just it's like over time, it's like, how can I do that? Even though I'm very distant, I shut myself out. I shut myself out on a lot of people. Um, and it just in general. But I have learned over time that now my son is 10 years old. He's autistic, so he wants hugs. So he would come over and he would give me a hug, and it's like, oh, I think I can accept that.
Right.
So over time, it's been a challenge. It still is a challenge. Love my children to death. My 8 and 10-year-old, they started back over because I have a 23-year-old, and he's on his own in Wisconsin right now. But
Right.
he's having secondary PTSD himself. But it's been a whirlwind. I will say it's been a roller coaster on the family, and I won't deny. In 2015 was the hardest probably time I started the job opportunity again after being unemployed, and
Mhm.
worked with veterans and worked with 3 years of working in a status where I did not realize I was working with higher officials. I was working with people um, that it re-triggered the time I was in the military and the harsh times that I had to go through for 8 months while I was getting kicked out of the military. And it re-triggered it every single time. I was literally spending more time at the counselor in Milwaukee than I was at working. But
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a very tough time.
Was it during that time that you realized that you needed to get more help before you could continue to work? Or because I know one of the things that it seems to be a pattern is that those that have encountered the trauma, it's difficult for them to keep a job. It's difficult for them to kind of interact and have any kind of conflict. So, were you able at that time to realize that you needed to focus more on your own health and healing, or did you still try to manage the two?
Well, at the time in 2018, I kept thinking to myself that I can do this. I didn't want to lose two careers. I already well, more careers, because I've already lost the military career, which devastated me because I wanted to be a career, oriented. I wanted to go to Germany, and all that other stuff and continue my career. But, unfortunately, it ended in 2004. Then I became a counselor, and because of the retriggering and the trauma, it ended my career as a counselor back in right after my daughter was born in 2012. I took some time off. I said, no, I can't do it anymore. And then I got an opportunity to work directly with veterans who were disabled as a diva. And I did that for a year and continued my time in the National Guard and the Reserve Center as an employment specialist.
Mhm.
But through that process, that's when I realized that I couldn't do it anymore. My husband was realizing it too. I was for 2 years. Most of the time, you travel a lot in the National Guard Reserve unit stuff, and I was literally more staying at home doing work and in my bed than I was out in the public, where I love to outreach. I love to be part of the community. I love to be connecting to people and hearing their stories, but I just couldn't do it at the time. And that's when I realized my husband had an opportunity to move. I said, let's go. I have nothing, I have friends there, but I have, I needed to start over. I needed to, nobody knew me in Florida except for you, Michelle.
Right.
Um, and nobody really knew me, and it was a fresh start. And even though I knew a year, I wasn't. I put my the nonprofit even on hold for a year, and questioning myself if I really wanted to restart it. And this is the process that while I was actually in crisis mode in 2015 to 2018, I was also placed myself. I told myself I was ready to file my claim. I was
Mhm.
ready to fight, um, because I was unable to keep a job.
Mhm.
And through this process, it was 4.5 years later, as of like I said, March of 2020, 4.5 years later, finally won my case. And still to this day, I'm not able to, hold a job for a full-time status.
Right.
But I do my own time. I'm, able to, work with, I women call me all the time, I need this, I need help with this, or I just want to talk, or, hey, I know this, referral, whatever the case may be. I hear a lot. And like you said, you work with MST. There are many, many MST soldiers, veterans, that are going through this process. I get a lot of active duty right now too, saying, hey, I'm going through this process. What do I do? And it's a
Okay.
struggle to tell. Many people, like we said, it's a struggle. And a lot of times we have to tell them to go outside the community,
Mhm.
just because it is honestly a politic piece to have to a lot of times face the community, within the active duty status. There are a lot of good resources, but very limited.
You said something that I think is very key. You took the time to relocate because you know you wanted to reset, you wanted to wipe the slate clean so that you could start all over where nobody knew you. And so, in a sense, you just took the step back to really take care of yourself so that you could continue to reach out and help, because that's your heart. And I know, from me meeting you back in 2015, I saw the passion and the drive then. Um, but knowing meeting you then and seeing you now, I just want you to know that you've come a long way,
Thank you.
on your road, on your journey, to recovery. And again, I'm honored to have you on to share your journey. And so, what has been, do you feel, what's been the secret or the key to you um, being able to sustain your stability?
I think, well, a lot of time, like I said earlier, when I started the claim process, And I moved here and tried to do the claim process, even as a volunteer VSO background. I couldn't do it by myself, and I needed the support. And I thank God for a couple individuals that reached out and said, "No, you're not done fighting. You are not done fighting. We believe in you, and we see the status. We see the paperwork in front of you. We can't understand why they're not listening." So they took initiative and helped me and guided me through the process. It was out of my hands after I gave them the paperwork and said, because I couldn't do it emotionally. I literally was in the ER room every time I got a denial or every time I had to think about a claim process or the mental health or whatever the status is. So what I have done is pretty much find the support. Find the support is one piece of it. Even if find the support, and you know, it's hard as me to say build that trust, because it's you pick and choose who you trust out there. And Michelle, you kind of know that factor too, as building the trust and picking and choosing who you trust. But I think the other thing of it is you have a fight inside you, regardless of where you gone, and you become the MST survivor. You have a fight and you have a goal or a story to tell. And I think that's what kept me going, is that I knew I had a story to tell. For many, many years, I felt I didn't have the confidence. I felt that I wasn't important. And my biggest tagline was, I'm not good enough, because I had a dysfunctional family. I had a career, a military career, that when I would read this document, 25-page document saying, you are a bad soldier, you're incompetent. And then I went into my other degree and careers, and it would be the same process. Finding out and realizing that it was my status that I wasn't overcoming, or I wasn't recovering from. I wasn't really focusing on me. And and it does help that people are reaching out. And there's a day that a woman will call me and say, "Oh my God, I got 100%. Thank you for helping," or "Oh my God, thank you for talking to me. I would have committed suicide." So it's just, and it's not just, it's about both of us. It's about both of us, you reaching out and me reaching out, being able to be heard. Like you say, in your, with the MST survivor, it's being heard, it's being recognized, and it's to the point where, it's the point that you are important. You are important regardless. There are people out there. Sorry, there are people out there that are going to have a negative impact, but there are a lot of people out there that want to be heard and want to be part of it.
So you no longer feel like you're the walking invisible. So what insights, Lynn, can you share? Like, say that there's a veteran, a male or a female veteran watching now. What would you share with them um, if they've experienced MST, on how they can show up in life? Whether they decide to report or whether they go unreported. What would you share with them today if they were debating about whether or not they wanted to share, or if they wanted to, even take their life? What would you say to that individual today?
First of all, don't stop fighting. And it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You were put in a position where it was not your fault. There are so many situations that come into play. Like I said before, when I was in active duty, and I forgot to mention that. And I don't know if it has a lot of good information on the reason for it, but when I was put in an infantry unit, and it was all males. I was the only white female in that infantry unit, and I was part of the soldiers. I was not a secretary, or I wasn't somebody doing the paperwork. I hate paperwork.
You were on the front.
I was on the front line. I was out there driving the semis and the thing. I was sitting out in the field and hanging out with the Rangers, and even hanging from the helicopters.
Right.
Really important, fun times and stuff. And that's why my service dog's name is Ranger, because it was a very important part of my life. Even though it was a struggle. And when 9/11 hit, I was at the Ranger Battalion. So it's okay. It's okay to feel what you feel too. Like I say, I had a lack of confidence. I had, I felt I was not good enough. I struggled. There are still days that I am a roller coaster, from bad days that I can't get out of bed to good days. And of course, we hide those days. I mean, I don't call people and say, hey, there are days that I was really in a really crisis mode, and I did call a few people, and they were there for my rescue.
Mhm.
Um, and I thank them for that. They understood what I was going through because of what they've gone through, and finding those people that have gone through the same circumstances and are there for you.
Thank you. I really wanted you to bring that out because it's so important because anybody that's experienced trauma, they tend to isolate and hide, hence the tagline, if
Mhm.
you hide, you can't heal it. And so I know you mentioned being in the Army, but you also mentioned something about the National Guard. Were you dual service and did you encounter assault in both services or was it just the one?
Yes, yes, I actually had it in both services. I was National Guard. In the National Guard, I served 6 years first, and we would have the weekend and the summer months we did the 2 3 week. It's a 2 or 3 weeks, and we did a lot of Fort McCoy runs. We did a couple bigger runs like Illinois and Missouri, all different states. But the one time I recall was there is again, it was a situation where this individual was drunk, and it was kind of after the fact. We were still at the Fort McCoy area, and he tried to rape me in the back alley, and luckily somebody came by, and I was afraid to report it because he was best friends with my sergeant.
Right.
But it was taken in, it was reported, but to this day, you'll never wouldn't be able to find that documentation. But to this day, I still to this day I talk to the sergeant, not about the situation. Find out that the individual needed help, and that he eventually got help, and he was in that situation. Um, but then when I went active duty again, you hear, especially in a unit where it was all males, you hear it day in and day out. Hey, sexy, look at that. It just things like that, comments and whatever the case may be.
What was it like being in that kind of environment? What was that like being in that kind of environment on a day-to-day basis?
You had to fit in. You
That.
you you literally had to fit in. So you either ignored it, you walked away, or you pretended to be part of that group. But what happened in the end was it got to the point where you had trust in your small area. You had trust in your unit. You
Mhm.
had to, because you were active duty, and whatever you did, everybody was part of. Um, but in the end, it was the last 8 months was, again, like I said, it was to this day, 15 years later, it was probably the worst time of my life.
Mhm.
But I'm learning from, I still have rebounds. Everybody does, but it's to the point of I want to do more. I want to better. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be stuck in the moment, and that was why I had to stand up for myself, because I was reliving it, even with the claim process, even with my status on my discharge. I was reliving it. I wanted to be part of Miss Veteran America. I couldn't do it because they said I had a general, and they wanted an honorable.
Right.
Um, they didn't question. They wouldn't go any further with that. So it was following me, and it was to the point of I was quiet. When I got out, I was quiet. I was quiet for years. It shut me down. It shut me down, and I was scared. I mean, I would freeze and shake, to the point that I didn't want to be around anybody. Um,
I have another question for you, but I just want to share with you what one of our viewing audiences is wanting to share with you. And she's very much an advocate here in the local area for mental health in the veteran community. And she said, stating, Jessica Bradstreet, I'm so glad that individuals going through this have people like you both to support you. You're so important in this space. So you definitely have support here. If you have not been able to, or if you were able to face your abusers today, one, would you be able to face them? And two, what would you say?
Many years, let me go into this way. Many years, I went through the 5 stages. When I first got out, I'm going to teach them a lesson. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to prove to them that I am a good teacher. And I am, this is the phases that I gone through. Denial, and no, I'm going to be better. I'm going to get my master's degree. I'm going to be a counselor. And
Right.
so I went through those phases. And to this day, there were times that I would try to look this individual up. I
Hmm.
can't find him, and that's good because I think that's where it's giving me a time to let go of the situation. It does put a burden on a lot of my. Have put a burden on my a lot of my future contacts with people, especially the males, for trust issues. I did while I was in a job opportunity. I put my trust into a female veteran, a male veteran, a boss, and thought, I talked about the first time I ever talked about my sexual assault, and he turned it around and said, "You deserve to you deserve to be raped." And I was like,
Well, I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah, it was and again, I thought it was a trust. I thought I trusted him, and so I put him
What was
up.
the response to that?
I walked away. I walked
Mhm.
away, and I walked away to the point, and I tried to report it, and it wasn't. It was like that person was, no, he didn't say it, or he, whatever the case may be. Um, I sent him a story of the piece, and that's what he told me in the end. It summed it up. Um, and I moved on to another position, and it was just that's what I was encountering for a long time. And it was even in the job descriptions. It was if it was a male oriented position, and even though I knew I had the confidence and I knew I did the job very well, I related to the veterans, I brought them in, they kept coming back. And then I had male veterans that worked the same job, and nobody was coming back to them, and they were jealous. And I will bluntly, and it got to the point that it was name calling and whatever the case may be, and that took a toll on me because then I became unemployed, and then I worked in those two positions and became crisis mode. And
Right.
so that's
So
where, yeah.
you've encountered a lot, I mean, an extreme amount that you've overcome, which just speaks to the resiliency that you have. So, with all of those experiences, Lynn, what are you doing now? Like, that was the tragedy. What is the triumph? What are you doing now in the community?
Well, what had helped me is the first stepping stone was I knew I couldn't go back to work at the time, and I
Hmm.
knew I had to, like many people say, I got to go see a counselor to get recover. My thing was I had to fight back.
Hmm.
I knew I was unemployable at the time, and I still am to this point because, I can't function. There's days that I cannot function at all. But to the point that that was one fight. I was still fighting it when I moved with the claim process. Because of the support when I moved here and the collaboration of a lot of resourceful information, I was able, even with the ER visits and in the crisis mode, I was able to get relief on March, right about my birthday time too, um, and to the point that I was good get a relief, and to the point that it was also financial relief because it was a back pay of 4 years.
Right.
So that piece, it was a fight. I felt like it was such a relief to have that off.
Hmm.
It wasn't about the money financially. It was about the trauma piece. The
Hmm.
other piece about it was while I was going through this process of the trauma, um, I was also going through schooling. and that school got so screwed up. They gave certain amount of money, they held money, they took money. It was just so many, and it got to the point that I was $160,000 in debt for student loans. And
Mhm.
because I became 100% and not able to do that process, I student loans were forgiven, and that
Right.
was, and it wasn't again financially. It was the stress of the trauma and what occurred during that process.
Mhm.
Well, during that whole process, what saved me and how I survived was working on my nonprofit. And it
Mhm.
wasn't because it was a nonprofit and, one of them, like they say, you don't make money in the nonprofit. It was the passion, like you said earlier, it was the passion. I knew how much of a fight I had to go through. I knew how much of a fight, even as a VSO, as a mental health provider, or as a claim representative, how much of a fight I had to go through. And I see day in and day out people having to fight through the process, and especially homelessness. I mean, if you're homeless, that's the first stepping stone. I mean, because you can't think of anything else.
Right. So what is
But
the name? What is the name of your organization?
hope for veterans. It brought me hope, and it brought me to survive. There were many times that I was very suicidal, and it saved my life.
Mhm.
And it was because of the support, because of the women veterans. And
So
a big
some of the services that you provide through Hope for Veterans.
Well, we provide, we have had, there are many different areas that we provide. We have provided, and thank Kelly and Tampa for one of them. We had a veteran who never went to a CP exam, and she attended the CP exam with her. And the idea came from Sister Sis program in Wisconsin that I was part of the board. So we reached out to someone, and she attended it, and to this day she has a percentage for her PTSD.
Mhm.
And she's still fighting, like many of us are. That was one piece of it, for support, for a peer-to-peer connection and advocate. The other one is, my husband's an IT major and works in the IT field, and we have had an opportunity. Um, FDVA has donated a few laptops, and what we've done is, in the state of Florida, we've done a couple out of state too, but in the state of Florida, we have given all the donated laptops. We refurbish and we give back to the community for women veterans, where they either they're starting a business, they want an education, or they are a rural area where they are in need and stay in contact with other women veterans or social groups. So we've
Mhm.
done that. We have probably donated already probably good 25 laptops this year just alone. We have also given gift cards, gas and gift grocery cards out to individuals, women
Mhm.
veterans and their families. And there are a couple other programs, an inspirational baskets. We do ask the veteran if what their need is. We have sent out, um, especially in the COVID timeframe, they just wanted art products. So we went and we purchased some things from Hobby Lobby and Michaels and sent out a whole packet of art supplies for her and her daughter to work on. So just being able to provide, and and with the resources like Jessica and Lisa and a few other women veterans out there, I wanted to acknowledge, you guys are lifesavers. For the homelessness project, the resources, and this is why, and it's not just, like I say, hope for veterans. I I couldn't not redo this hope for veterans in Florida, because I've found this more struggle here and the higher population.
Right.
It is the state of Florida. We're trying to help. We are trying to collaborate with other organizations that are wanting to help women veterans. Like I said, our ultimate goal is to have community areas where we can house our women veterans and their families. And
Mhm.
that's going to be a long journey. But those are the couple few things that we're doing.
Well, Florida has the second highest population of veterans here, so of course the incidence of things such as this, the military sexual trauma, among other things, are going to be higher. What is a takeaway and a call to action for that veteran that is listening in, that is where you once were, maybe not coming out of the home, not getting out of bed for days and weeks and months at a time? What is a takeaway and a call to action for them? And for those of you that are interested in connecting with Lynn, her information is scrolling across the screen, her website and her email, her contact information. And I will be providing additional resources before we close out for today's series. But I just wanted to give Lynn an opportunity to give a takeaway and a call to action for those listening in.
I missed that word "take of action." I think that's a military frame of mind when we say that.
What call to action?
Yeah, call of action. Well, call of action today. I think the overall piece of it is there. As an MST survivor, like I say, I was ashamed and I felt guilty, and I felt my story wasn't important enough. And because of people supporting me and reaching out, it's a phone call away. Even if you want to just give me a call, I get calls every day, just about every day. Hey, I just want to talk, or just texting me. Hey, how are you doing today? I try to stay in contact. If I'm not answering, that just means I'm busy. But texting, and even if it's not me, even if it's someone else, please reach out, because you are important. You are not alone. There, like you said, Michelle, there is such a high population of MST survivors. And if you haven't, the widespread this year has been a bigger case, I think, because of the national. We had the issue in the issue with the sexual assault in California, with, I won't say names, but and having it to go high up through the national. And she was a big advocate for women veterans. And it takes that big of a session to open, to allow people, even MST survivors, to reach out, because I know how much, especially my story, how much I've been pushed down so many times, how many times that I've been trying to tell a story that I've been pushed back, and called a liar, and called, whatever the name is. I wasn't important enough to tell it. But you are very important. Like Michelle, I've been on her since 2015. I'm gonna write my story. I'm gonna write my story. And she, honestly, Michelle, you have inspired me to even think about it, even though it's in the back of my mind. Like I tell you before, my English isn't quite up to speed, and that is my weakness.
Well,
But
that's what they have editors for. So.
yes. And so it's just being able to, being that confident level. And I always felt that my journey wasn't finished. My story wasn't finished and told. Even in March of 2020, and I felt like a very big weight fell off of me because of the support I did reach out to. And we need a lot of support. And I think for the takeaway, the action is, it's not just our nonprofit. We need not just volunteers. We need women that have a story to tell. We need women with unique skills out there. There are a lot of them. I come across a real estate person, or I come across individuals that have experience being a paralegal, or experience of just so many unique experiences that some of them are 100% already, and they don't have a hobby, or they want to do something.
But they
So
don't.
that, yeah, and that's where I want to say, that's where this nonprofit wants to come into play, is that it's not just about volunteering. It's about giving back what you've already experienced, or giving back the knowledge that you can give to someone else that might need it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot out there, and a lot of very unique, and very important women out there.
Well, thank you so much, Lynn. I want to thank you again, Lynn, for agreeing to come on and share your journey, and to be a source of hope and a beacon of light. in the midst of the darkness of those that are in the dark night of the soul, wherever they are on their journey with MST, whether they be male or female. So thank you again for coming on to share your journey. For those of you that did not hear it, to sum it all up, Lynn, in a nutshell, said the takeaway is do not give up. That's the takeaway, and the call to action is to get the help that you need and know that your voice is valuable and that you are valuable and that you are worthy. And if you want to reach out to Lynn, her website is across the bottom of the screen, Hope for Veterans, hope the number 4veterans.org. And you can email her as well. It's there on the screen. I'm not going to try to say it because I'll butcher it. But I just wanted to recap that it is so important for us to keep this topic in the forefront of everybody's mind, because MST has contributed to the breakdown of many families within the service and those and the surrounding families that are trying to support them. So we will not stop talking about this. We will not stop getting housing and the other wraparound services, a continuum of care, of support for those individuals that are battling, because even years later, they're still battling. And so if you are in crisis and you need help, the hotline, the number is across the screen, the Department of Defense Safe Helpline, which is available 24/7, and the National Sexual Assault Hotline, and that's 800-656-HOPE. And so there's some additional resources are Protect Our Defenders, RAIN.org, mentalhealth.va.org, LoneSurvivorFoundation.org. All of these organizations are phenomenal and can get you the resources and the tools and the help that you need to get back to living. Because again, what we all want is to be loved, to be seen, and to be heard. And for many of those that have encountered trauma, they feel like they no longer have a voice, that they are unlovable, and that they are invisible. And so to counteract that, we are going to be sure that they are loved, seen, and heard. And so I want to thank you all so much for tuning in to the MST Survivor Series, highlighting those veterans that have turned their tragedies into triumph. And as you can see, Lynn is very much a warrior and has, championed over her challenges. Even though she still may encounter them, she has the tools and the resources and the firm foundation of support to continue to carry her through her journey, because it is a journey, it is not a destination. So thank you again. And thank you all for tuning in. This is Michelle of Michelle Speaks. If you hide it, you can't heal it. We're going to sign off for today, but we look forward to you guys continuing to follow us, like, Michelle Speaks page, like Lynn's page. Reach out to her, connect with us, and help us on this movement. If you have resources, reach out to us, because we want to connect and we want to collaborate to end the stigma associated with military sexual trauma. Take care, be well, and God bless. Thank you so much for tuning in.
It takes a village.